All right, we're going to talk here about the origin of World War One, and while a lot of people think it starts because of the assassination, which we're going to talk about, then it's not completely wrong. We're going to add a little bit more depth to that and talk about um, some of the things that lay the groundwork for the war in general. So our causes of World War One are going to spell out at the acronym MAIN, M-A-I-N. We're not going to go in that order, but when rearranged, that's an easy way to remember them. So we're going to start with nationalism. This is a pretty newish concept by the time we get to the early 1900s. Late 1800s, certainly, it was pretty new. People are starting to think of themselves as citizens and members of a nation and expressing that pride, extreme pride, that goes along with that citizenship. Sometimes that can be great in times of crisis, in times of need for a country. It's easy to rally the population around a particular event or an issue when needed. Sometimes it can be a negative. If everybody thinks of themselves as the best, by definition, everybody else is underneath them, and that can lead to suspicion and competition, mistrust, and outright dislike or hate for somebody else, another group of people, and that can lead to conflict. Another part of nationalism is ethnic groups wanting their own country run by themselves. So for example, uh, there were Polish people in Europe, of course, but there was no Poland. The Polish ethnicity either lived in Germany or Russia, and Germany or Russia didn't really care for the Polish people, so they weren't treated nicely. So they wanted the creation of a Poland so that they could govern themselves. Another example is the Slavic people in southeastern Europe were mostly, there's Slavic people are a bunch of different groups, the Serbs, the Croats, the Slovenes, and a bunch of others. There was a Serbia, but the Croats, the Montenegrins, the Slovenes, they lived in Austria-Hungary. They wanted a country just for Slavic people, and that's going to lead to some competition. We'll talk about that in a second. The next one is imperialism. You already know this. You know it's competition for land and trying to expand. Areas to expand are dwindling in the early 1900s, so competition becomes more intense. We know the benefits of imperialism, so we know how that can lead to conflict. Militarism is one of the causes of World War One. As technology is increasing and along with nationalism, countries are building up their armies for no real reason other than to flex their muscles and show how strong they are. There's no conflict on the horizon, but they're getting stronger anyway. So Germany had the best army in the world, they made it even better. Great Britain had the best navy in the world, they made it even better, to show each other how strong they were. One potential positive of this is that it could be preventative. If you know a potential enemy is super strong, you may not pick a fight with them. So this idea of peace through strength has some merit, but what that also means is that when a war does start, it's going to be pretty ugly. And the A here is alliances. Europe started divided itself into teams. Sometimes that's based on economics, sometimes political and military alliances. The two main alliances during right before World War One are the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. And when we get to the map, we'll talk about why these alliances were necessary. But these essentially become the sides in the war. Italy switches sides, the Ottoman Empire jumps in. The United States eventually joins France and Russia and Great Britain, but we'll talk about that later. The goal here is balance of power. If you know, and it can also be preventative, if you know that you're not just going to war with one country, but all of their allies, that might give you pause. But again, there's negative consequences there too. So let's talk about how war actually broke out. If you think about those four causes as four big scoops of gunpowder going into a barrel, this assassination is a spark that made it all explode. So Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated by Serbian nationalists who were upset that Austria-Hungary grabbed a Slavic province before that could potentially be integrated into a pan-Slavic nation. And so in retaliation for that, they assassinated the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary. As you can imagine, Austria-Hungary was really mad about that, and they blamed Serbia and they wanted retribution. So at this point, this conflict is just between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. So the question is, how do we go from that to a Europe-wide, worldwide war? Well, Austria blames Serbia for the assassination. Serbia says we had nothing to do with it. It's just some nationalists. The truth is they did have something to do with it, but they said they didn't. Serbia, fearful that they were going to be attacked by Austria-Hungary, called on one of their allies, who happens to be Russia. Russia is really big and potentially really strong, so their siding with Serbia would give Austria-Hungary potentially some pause about going to war with Serbia. They certainly didn't want to go to war with Serbia and Russia. So Russia mobilizes for war, gets ready for war, and a country as big as Russia getting ready for war is essentially a declaration of war. So that's how it's taken. So Russia essentially declares war on Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary's main ally is Germany. Germany sides with its ally, declares war on Russia. Germany also declares war on France because France is Russia's big ally, and they're going to go to war with them eventually. So now what was a local conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia now involves Russia and Germany and France. Great Britain is not involved yet. They are physically separate from the war, um, like just geographically, and they decide to stay out. However, they're drawn into the conflict, of course, and we'll talk about how that works here in a second. So here are the two sides of the war. Obviously, the downside of this for Germany is that they're surrounded. They don't want to fight Russia and France at the same time, so they're going to want to avoid that at all costs. So their plan here is to attack France first, knock them out. That's going to keep the Great Britain out of the war, and then they can concentrate on Russia. So they're going to try and invade here with another wave of attack going up and encircling Paris through Belgium, encircling Paris, and hopefully just essentially decapitate France and knock them out so they don't have to worry about them anymore. The problem is, even though once the plan is actually put into place, they meet the French army here, this arm comes up just short, so the majority of the fighting takes place in right here. And eventually there becomes a 400-mile long front around here that stays that way for about the next 4 years. So not a whole lot of land is gained, but a whole lot of people are dying. And where that's going to be one of the areas of focus for our discussion in this unit. Just what I described, they want to attack France first, worry about Russia later. The big goal here is to avoid a two-front war. They don't want to fight France and Russia at the same time. However, the plan fails, and they do have to fight Russia and France at the same time. As they're going to attack France, they go through Belgium. Belgium wants no part of this, but they don't really have a choice. Germany's going to invade. And Belgium's big ally is Great Britain. This draws Great Britain into the war. So that's why they join. Just as an illustration of just how bad this war would become, one of the first big battles of the war is the First Battle of the Marne. It gets really close to Paris. The French counterattack, huge battle that takes place over 4 months. 250,000 French troops were lost, and a similar number for Germany. Nobody was prepared for how bad this war was going to be. It's been a long time since Europe had had a war. New technologies, new pieces of killing machines were introduced into war, but the planners didn't have any idea how to use them properly. So a whole bunch of people died as they were trying to figure that out. Russia was given time to properly prepare for war. They enter the war, and that caused a lot of problems for Germany. One of the key words of the war becomes stalemate. Trenches are a good example of this. So rather than continuing to try and attack and defend, both sides dug in and stayed in their trenches for 4 years or so, and the line never really moved more than a mile or two in either direction. And the idea of digging for cover is not brand new, but this is something different. 400-mile system of trenches is something warfare hadn't seen before. That area between the trenches was known as no man's land. You don't really want to get up out of your trench and advance through no man's land. You're probably going to get shot. You're going to sustain heavy losses. So the motivation was there to stay in your trenches and blast away at the enemy with artillery guns and other pieces of weaponry and try and kill the enemy while not actually trying to advance on them. So the war got really bad really fast. And here are just some quick examples of trenches. Doesn't look too enticing, and it was in fact a pretty miserable experience. And we'll expand on that as we go. So obviously, just like always, if you have any questions, please let me know.